Oh, they believe that. They will believe that. In these last few weeks, oh yes, I forgot to tell you that this is our second Chicago closed class 1958. And it is April 1958. And we're in Chicago, and it's not true that they have snow all year. That's for the benefit of our people in South Africa and Australia who might want to visit here and are afraid of the snowstorms. In these last few weeks, the question has come up more and more and more, what about this body? This body bothers me. What about this body? That really shouldn't have been in the infinite way, because there's been so much in the writings and on the tapes on the subject of body that it should be clear. But I do understand that occasional reminders are helpful. And so I'm going to start out this evening with an unfoldment on the subject of body that came to me the other morning after we had had a most unusual talk in the evening at the Unity Church in Louisville. We had a very large attendance there, and somehow out of it came a most unusual talk, very deep. I was still in the spirit. The next noon I hadn't come out of it. But this came, and I wrote it down. It combines the subject of neither good nor evil as we may apply it to the body. Now you'll remember this, that we are talking from a purely spiritual or mystical standpoint. We know that there are three levels of consciousness: the material, the mental, and the spiritual. We know that there are people who live so completely on the physical level of life that they understand nothing but physical might, physical power, and physical remedies. We understand also that there are people who live on the mental level of life, and even though they have physical bodies, they live mostly the mental life, and the physical life is just a sort of an added thing. And then there are those who reach the spiritual level, and to them both the mind and the body are instruments of the soul. And that is the standpoint from which the Infinite Way message is presented. It is presented that you are soul. You are God's soul. That's your true identity. God, the soul, is the soul of man. And you are that soul. You are that consciousness. Your true identity is not body. When you look in the mirror, you're not seeing yourself, you're seeing your body. And when you are thinking, that thought process or mind process is not you. It is an instrument which you are using for thought purposes. So that behind the mind and the body, there is you. You, the thinker. And mind is the faculty of thought. Body is the instrument of, call it locomotion or getting around or whatever you call this human experience of transportation. Now, with that in mind, you are the soul. The mind is the instrument which you use for awareness, and the body is your instrument of daily life. My body has neither qualities nor quantities of good or of evil, has neither sickness nor health, is neither large nor small, has neither life nor death, for my body is the temple of God, God's substance expressed as form, and embodying and including all and only qualities and quantities which constitute God, the I Am, the soul. My body has neither youth nor age. It is as ancient as God, and as young as each new day. My body is not governed by laws of matter or of mind, but it is governed by the grace of God. For thine is the kingdom, and the glory, and the power. God is the light of my body. In my body is neither material darkness nor mental ignorance. God is the light unto his holy temple, which my body is. God unfolds, discloses, reveals himself as body, as temple, a place of holiness and peace, which my body is. God's grace maintains and sustains his body, which my body is. Laws of mind and matter belong only to this world, which I have overcome. My peace, my grace, sustains the spiritual kingdom, which is my abiding place. Now, to think, to be able to remember that you live and move and have your being as consciousness, in consciousness, removes you from the sense of living in a body and being limited by a body. You don't live in your automobile and you're not limited by your automobile. You can jump in and out at will. And when you once understand that you live as consciousness, and that as consciousness you are the soul of your body, the soul of your mind, you are the law, the life unto your mind and unto your body, you will do two things. You come out of that belief that existed before metaphysics was discovered and practiced, the belief that body itself has the issues of life. In other words, that body can have health, or that body can be healthy, or that body can be diseased. Now, we have known for decades that that is not true, that the body is actually subject to something higher than itself. And the first teaching along that line was that the body was subject to mind. And that set people up using their minds to control bodies. And at first it worked. It was such a novel idea and so new, and nobody had ever thought of using the mind for purposes of control except the old primitive people who had known these mental things for, countless centuries. But modern man knew nothing about using the mind as a control. And all of a sudden he began to close his eyes and use his mind and control his body with it. And for a little while that worked, and sometimes with new beginners it still works, because of the novelty of the idea and the fact that it's something new and different, something on which to pin a hope. But it doesn't last forever because it leaves out of consideration the fact that behind thought there must be a thinker. And the thinker isn't a person. Thinker is God, the soul of man. Now the difference is this. If I am operating on the level of mind or thought, I could close my eyes and say that your body is well and your body functions normally and your body responds to this truth that I'm knowing. The chances are that in some cases there would be healings, there would be benefits, and in the olden days there really were remarkable healings. But actually this never was the full truth, that the mind of one person could control the body even of themselves or of another person. It was only one of those on the way to get there places. It was a stopping place, a higher level than believing that the body determined itself. But now, from our standpoint of spiritual healing and spiritual living, where we understand that God God is really the soul, the law, the life unto all being, the substance, and that mind is an instrument, and the body is the outer manifestation. Now we have an entirely different process in which we can close the eyes now. And we will assume for a moment that any one of you, or all of you, has asked for help. And now we will close the eyes, and I will think no thoughts. I will take no thought for what you shall eat, or what you shall drink, or wherewithal you shall be clothed, or what your health shall be. I will merely sit there, knowing that my mind is an avenue of receptivity. Receptive to what? The still small voice, that which we call God, that which we call the soul of man. And then I, Joel, will sit here in this receptive mood, and I will think no thoughts, and I will make no declarations. I will just be receptive. And then the still small voice, if you want to call it that, or as the Psalms gives it, he uttered his voice, the earth melted. In that silence in which I have become almost a vacuum, a listening vacuum, always attentive, never sleepy, never tired, never lagging, always awake, alert. Remember, I'm waiting for the visitation of the Christ. I'm not going to be caught asleep when it comes. And then, out of the stillness, out of the infinity which is God, out of the depths of my soul, which is God, comes either a voice or a feeling or a stirring or a release or an assurance, call it any name you wish, and the earth melts. That is, error dissolves, disappears. Now you see, it makes no difference whether it's physical, mental, moral, financial, or human relations, because it isn't my wisdom that's undertaking the work. I'm not drawing now on what I've learned in my years of life on earth. I'm not starting to judge what your life should be. I am holding myself completely receptive to that which created you in the beginning and which knows your destiny, and now I'm going to allow it to voice itself, and then you'll be back where you belong, under the jurisdiction, under the government of your Heavenly Father, which is within you, closer than breathing, nearer than hands and feet, he that knoweth your need before you do, and he whose pleasure it is to give you the kingdom. So you see, I then, as the practitioner or teacher, I become a transparency. You don't come to me, you're coming to God. And I do not assume the duties or functions of God to know what's right for you, or to tell you what's right, or even to know how to bring harmony into your experience. My function is to pray. Now, the difference between prayer as you were taught it in Orthodox teachings and prayer as you learn it in spiritual teachings is this. In your older teachings, it was assumed that you knew what to pray for. Health, harmony, employment, companionship, so forth. And you went about asking for it. In prayer, as it is taught in all mystical teachings, no human says a word or thinks a word. The praying is done by God in man. And I am merely the instrument through which the voice of God, the truth of God, He utters His voice. What is it about His word? Is quick and sharp and powerful. Doesn't say anything about my word being that. Doesn't say anything about your word being that. And let nobody believe that their word is quick and sharp and powerful, because nobody has risen to that point yet, not even Jesus Christ, who said, and wasn't a bit ashamed to say, I can of my own self do nothing. If I spoke of myself, I'd speak a lie. Therefore, it is not my wisdom, nor my power that's healing you, but His that sent me. And therefore, I become receptive and responsive. I become a transparency. And then He comes, whose right it is, and moves right in. And it's quick, sharp, powerful, changes the body upside down in the twinkling of an eye when we are really receptive and responsive to it. Now, we have come through many states and stages of consciousness to reach this one. We have come through those stages where we prayed, bless my mama and my papa and my aunt, my uncle and my cousins, and had no thought at all for the neighbors down the street. And we have come through the state of consciousness where we pray for a patient or a student. There was that stage too. Some were even taught to mention the name of their patient in the treatment. Some were even taught to have a list with a whole lot of names running down there. Take one at a time. As if God could do something for this one and omit this one over here, or as if we could direct a prayer to this particular person and have God's energy come down and center itself on the person we named. Not only that, we were so presumptuous, we also named the name of the disease. Oh yes, we knew that too. Doctors have only attained 50% of accuracy in their diagnosis, but we assumed 100%. We could always say it was the heart, the liver, or the lungs, and send God right down there. Oh, that was a state and stage of consciousness too. But now we know that true prayer is a realization of universal truth. Prayer is a realization of something that is true about the entire kingdom of God and of God's creation. I'm not praying when I know the truth about you. I'm only praying when I know the truth. The truth is that God is the life of individual being. God is the life of animal, vegetable, mineral kingdom. God is the soul and the substance and the law and the activity. God is the very presence unto all that is. God is the only power. Beside God there is no power. Whether you call it infection or contagion or heredity or old age or approaching age, whether you call it infection, whether you call it epidemic, accident, there's no such thing in the kingdom of God. When we know this truth about God and God's creation, and then sit in this quietness for God to utter his voice, then we hear from the patient that there is improvement, that there is healing, that there's a change, that something or other is taking place, even if it's only a change in concepts or consciousness. The question is then, how does prayer or treatment of this kind reach your particular patient? And the answer is that they have brought themselves to your consciousness and have thereby made themselves a part of your consciousness, and every bit of spiritual truth that takes place in your consciousness becomes the law unto them. Now, unfortunately, it was discovered, and this was back in the days when you were knowing the good truth about your patient and they responded beautifully, it was discovered that you could also know something bad about them and make that come true. And there came a dilemma, because now you couldn't be sure when you went to a practitioner whether they were going to know the good truth or the bad truth. But you see, this eliminates all of that, because we make the acknowledgement that neither the good thinking, the right thinking of an individual, or the wrong thinking has any power. Neither the right thinking nor the wrong thinking of any individual has a power over you or over me. In other words, the human mind is not a power. It's an avenue of awareness. And the thoughts of man are not power. Why? Because only God's thoughts are power. And because we now know not only that power isn't in the effect or form or what was called matter, we also now know that the power isn't in the mind of an individual, or in the good thoughts of an individual, or in the truth that an individual declares, but the power is in the God that flows through the consciousness, or flows as the consciousness, of individual being. Now, do you not see what we are dealing with? On this side is the world, that which Jesus overcame. What did that world consist of? Now, it wasn't an externalized world, you know, because the Sanhedrin went right on performing its unholy functions, and Rome went right on conducting its unholy business. Nothing was changed in the outer world at all, and yet the Master says, I have overcome the world. Actually, what had he done? He proved that neither matter nor mind had power. He did not have to fear the mind of man, nor the body of man, nor the carnal weapons of man, for they were powerless in his recognition of the fact that God alone is power. Now, he could well recall Isaiah then, cease ye from man whose breath is in his nostril. Cease ye from believing that you can get any good out of his right thinking, and cease ye from believing that he can do any harm with his wrong thinking, since the only power is God's spirit, soul, and when it utters its voice, the earth melted. Now we have in the metaphysical books of, we have several good metaphysical books that have been in the metaphysical world, and there's enough truth in these to do a lot of healing work. And there are a lot of people who have memorized every one of those books and can recite them and can't heal a headache. There have been lots of people who have studied those books, taken an examination, got 97% and a diploma, and can't heal a headache. And the reason is, and they're all good thoughts in those books. Emily Cady never wrote any bad thoughts, neither did Mrs. Eddy. They're all good thoughts. Lots of good ones in the infinite way. Oh, I'll give you an assurance on that. Not a bad thought in it. But you could know all of those good thoughts and right thoughts, and you could declare them, and you still might never heal a headache. Not even a simple one. Why? Because there's no power in thought. Who, by taking thought, can add to a statue 1 cubit? Who, by taking thought, can make a white hair black? And if you can't, by taking thought, do the least of these things, what makes you think that by taking thought you can heal cancers and consumption and polio and stop wars and poverty and all the rest of it? And the answer is, you can't. You really can't. If you are of a strong enough mentality, and you can get some patients of a weak enough mentality, you can sit around knowing some truth and making you out feeling that they've been healed. And maybe they are of that particular claim, but next week it'll be a different one. Now, watch this, because on this, the whole success of your work depends in the infinite way. When you want to help yourself or another, voice, either orally or silently, all the truth that you can remember, whether from Scripture or from the writings. But voice truth about God and God's activities. Don't voice any truth about man, because there isn't any. Voice the truth about God. Then when you're through, realize that all you've done is prepare yourself for prayer. You haven't yet prayed. You haven't even yet treated. All you have done is lift yourself up by your own bootstraps to where you can now get quiet. All right, Father, I've had my say. I will listen for thy voice. I am listening for the still small voice. And develop. This isn't easy, but it's necessary. Develop this listening attitude. Father, if I know anything at all, it is that my words are nothing and my thoughts are less. If my good thoughts were any power at all, I'd have my mother sitting right beside me on the platform. If my good thoughts counted for anything at all, I know a lot of wonderful people I'd love to have around me, and I'd keep them here. But I couldn't. Thoughts are not power. Thy word is power. Thy word is grace. Thy word will lift up from the dead. Thy word will open the eyes of the blind and open the ears of the deaf. Thy word in the midst of me is mighty. And then sit and let it come. It takes practice. It takes time. It takes a conscious knowing of all the truth that you possibly can know to prepare yourself. Because when you get to this point of listening, you must have a solid foundation of conviction that there's only one power, that you're not going to God to have him heal a disease, that you're not going to God to have him change somebody's nature, you're not going to God to have him reformed, you're not going to God for supply. Otherwise, you're acknowledging two powers, good and evil. And you want God, the big good power, to do something to the nasty little devil power. No, no, no. You will never be able to rest. You will never be able to sit back in peace while you're waiting for a great big God to do something to an error. You will only have peace when you can sit in the realization, Thank you, Father. All I expect of your word is that it'll burst the bubble, pierce the veil. Harmony already is. I wouldn't be here listening to God if I believed there were inharmony or discord, because I can't believe in a God if there is inharmony or discord. My only hope and faith in God is that it's so infinite, so good, that it has never permitted evil of any name or nature. Therefore, I'm suffering from a delusion. Not my delusion, it's a world delusion. It all began with the belief in good and evil. And because of that belief in good and evil, we are human beings. Take from me this belief in good and evil and leave me with the realization that God alone is. I'll be satisfied. And that then will enable you to come to the second part of your work, which ultimately you will realize to be the most important part. And that is this. We want the realization of God, and we want the demonstration of God. We want the realization of God's presence. We want the realization of God's Word, but not for any purpose. And on that hinges the whole secret of success in spiritual living. Unless we want God, period, we will be using God for a servant or a tool, and we'll be using God to serve some purpose of ours, and thereby we'll make God our servant instead of our being God's servant. The moment I have a desire for God to do something to me, I'm asking God to do my bidding. The minute I expect something of God, I'm using God as my servant, as my instrument, as my tool, and I have got the relationship so completely reversed that I cannot meet with success. I can only want God for the purpose of God realization. What it does to me or to my affairs, it's entirely different. But the minute I try to direct God to bring me companionship, or bring me a home, or bring me an occupation, or bring me a talent, God then becomes the means to an end. That's kind of shocking when you think it over. It's the usual idea of prayer and treatment, that God is going to do something for us, or that we are influencing God in the right direction, or we are bringing about God's doing of something. And this isn't right. This isn't prayer. That's why it isn't effective. The only effective prayer is the attainment of God realization. Not for any purpose. For any purpose, that makes God a servant. God isn't a servant. We are the servants of the Most High. We are the instruments as which God can express, as long as we don't have a will of our own, or a power of our own, or a desire of our own. That's why in our wisdoms it is given us often, the only sin is desire. When that came out, mothers wrote me all over, is it a sin that I desire my child to be well? Is it a sin if I desire abundant supply? And I'd have to write back, yes, all desire is sin. All desire is sin, except the desire to know him aright, whom to know aright is life eternal. That's the only desire that is not sin. What right has anybody got to want to see their child well? But all right if they'd have just said, could I desire that all men and women on the face of the earth be well? Well, now maybe that'd be a little higher thing. But just my child, and ignore this one's child down on the corner, gives me shivers. You see, God is no respecter of persons. And that can be taken in two ways. God is no respecter of this human being. Because if God were a respecter of human beings, all human beings would be spiritual, perfect, eternal, harmonious, and prosperous. And we wouldn't have any need of truth movements. It is only because God is not a respecter of persons that persons are trying to find out what is the secret that brings harmony into my experience, and the answer comes from Paul: die daily. Die daily to your humanhood and become reborn of the Spirit or the Master. My kingdom is not of this world. Well, don't try to bring my kingdom then into this world, but leave this world for my kingdom. And how do you do that? Drop your desires. Come up high in the atmosphere of prayer to where you can really say to God, I want nothing of a selfish nature. I want nothing of a personal nature. The heavens declares the glory of God. The earth showeth forth his handiwork. I too must show forth God's grace, God's glory. Nothing selfish, because when I say I'm speaking of you. I am you and you are me. I in you and you in me. What I'm seeking for myself, I'm seeking manifest as the world. Wouldn't it be terrible if there was one healthy person in the world and all the rest were disease? Wouldn't it be terrible if there were one wealthy person in the world and all the rest were poor? What happiness, what glory, what achievement could there be for the one or the few? You have to get your joy out of life. Everybody in this world has to be having the same joy, the same freedom that you are, else you can't be joyful and you can't be free, because you've got their groans inside of you, even if you don't know what it is that makes you wake up in the morning and feel sad. And you look and you say, but what have I got to be sad about? Life is beautiful. Your life is, but you are feeling the cries of the millions. And you know you can't be entirely happy while you know that there's much misery in the world. You can't be entirely happy with your wealth while you know all this poverty is going on in the world. You know, it's like traveling in some of these foreign places. India, Hong Kong. You leave your hotel in the morning, you go out on the street, and there's a dozen women out there, each one with a 3 or 4 month old baby on their arm. You wonder where they get them all this one age. And they have the baby's hand out this way for pennies, for coppers. And you can't go out really and enjoy your day because there's so many of them there, you can't feed them all. Or you have to go back to your room and wire for money. And so you finally do go out, but inwardly you're carrying that burden with you of all these people that you're seeing there. Many times I meet people on the trip who have been to those places and say, I couldn't go back because I can't have any joy there. Well, I know, but that's putting your head in the sand. They're there just the same, and you know they are. At least with us, we can become free of the burden. We know we haven't got enough dollars in our pocket or in our government treasury to take care of the whole situation, but we can be free, because even though silver and gold have we none, that which we have we can give them, and that is our righteous prayer, which is opening ourselves to God to let the Spirit of God come through and feed them and clothe them and house them, which with all the money we may have, we can't do. The only way that you can live without the burden of this world's disasters is if you're living in a true sense of prayer, where you know that you are sharing, even if not silver and gold, you are sharing the one thing that will lift them out of their troubles more quickly than money would. And that is this very prayer. Not, oh, God, feed these poor children. Nobody pays attention to that, not even God. That kind of prayer has been going on for thousands of years. That doesn't do any good. Oh, God, pity these poor people and do something for them. It never happens. China has been this way for centuries, and India has been this way for centuries, and people have been going to church praying, oh, God, do something about it. No, but you can lighten your load and theirs by a righteous sense of prayer. That is, by your realization of the one infinite nature, the one infinite power, the one infinite glory, the one life, then the ability to sit back, be a transparency. And through your consciousness, or as your consciousness, God comes into the world. Now, that is why a minister, a metaphysical minister, on a platform, or a metaphysical teacher, or a metaphysical lecturer, on a platform, not knowing who's in the audience or what their conditions are, always brings out some degree of healing in the audience. He never knows how much, because sometimes people don't realize that their healing came while they were at that particular event. It happened the next day or the day after, and they didn't connect it with that. Sometimes it happens in such a miraculous manner, though, that they almost know the minute during the lecture or the service or the class when it happened. But the point that I'm making is that every metaphysical minister or lecturer or teacher, merely by being on the platform, is producing healings in his audiences. Now, some of those healings may be a physical disease, but most of them consist of the regeneration of consciousness of the individuals in the group, so that if they stay there 6 months or 9 months or a year, they find their whole consciousness regenerated, and whereas before they were blind, now they see. Whereas before they were poor, now they're employed. Whereas before they were spiritually ignorant, now they are spiritually illumined. And that comes not because the minister, teacher, practitioner knows anything about that individual out there. Oh, no. It is because in his or her meditations, they have made themselves a transparency for God, not by voicing truth and not by asking God to do things, but by coming to the realization that God finds entrance into human consciousness only as the consciousness of an illumined individual. Do you not see that the world at large in its ignorance has no God in it? And that's why all these horrible evils can take place. And then as soon as an individual gets into a community with some measure of enlightenment, his community begins to change. More health comes, more supply, more peace, more spiritual understanding, more of a universal brotherhood. So it is. As this multiplies, that's how peace ultimately must come on earth. Don't think it can come on earth while the human race stays a human race, each one fighting for its own good, each one praying for its own child, each one supporting only its own particular neighborhood or church or religion. Oh, no, there'll never be peace on earth that way. There never will. All these differences will keep them divided. Peace on earth will come when, through the enlightened consciousness, let's go back and say of Moses, a whole race of people is carried through the wilderness into freedom. When later, through the one enlightened consciousness of a Jesus Christ, hundreds upon hundreds of people catch the light. 12 here, 70 here, 200 here, go out into the world and carry that light. Each one of those becomes a light unto some community. And so you have a 300-year period in which spiritual light is spreading. Well, as soon as a period comes along in which you squelch those illumined ones, then you've taken the light out of the world. No, an individual to be spiritually illumined has to be kept on tiptoes, demonstrating supply not only for themselves, that's the least of it, but for the community. He has to be demonstrating health, not merely for himself, but for all of those who come to him. That keeps him on his spiritual toes, completely always in the realization of this. Otherwise, he just goes back to a mountain. He's physically well, he's financially well off, and so he sits there. No demonstration to make. Pretty soon he's as dull as the rest of them. And that's what happened. They put all of these people who were the Christian missionaries and the Christian ministers, and all, they put them on a payroll as soon as they organized the church. And instead of the ministers supporting the people had to come in and support the ministers. And believe it or not, they've perpetuated that nonsense until now. It's the duty of every good member of a church to support his minister or his church. What the minister's for, I don't know. No, you see, spiritual illumination consists of the realization that there is this world, a world of darkness, not as a reality, but it does exist as an appearance, as something to be dealt with. But the fact that there is such a thing as a God of infinity, eternality, immortality, and then the ability to be still and let God function. And then as God functions in my mind and in my body and in my purse, it's only one other step to the same God functioning in your mind and your body and your purse. These people call it demonstrations of supply, demonstrations of health, demonstrations of companionship, and it isn't. It isn't. It's demonstration of God. That's why they lose their demonstrations eventually. They really believe they've demonstrated something or some condition or some person. And the demonstration never consisted of that. The demonstration consists of demonstrating God. Once you have attained the realization of God, there's no other demonstration to make. Because God never sends a fortress or a high tower. God is the fortress and the high tower. God never sends life eternal. God is your life eternal. God never sends supply. I am the meat and the wine and the water and the bread and the resurrection. There's no such thing as a God and. There's no such thing as God giving us anything. God is the giver, but all that God can give is himself. God is the giver, God is the gift. When you have God, you have eternal harmonies. Now, outwardly, it may manifest as your health, it may manifest as a new occupation, it may manifest as a new talent, a new gift of some kind. It may manifest as a long-lost inheritance. It can manifest in anyone, but then watch out and don't get hooked. Don't say, I've made a demonstration of supply, I've made a demonstration of companionship, I've demonstrated my health. You haven't. You've demonstrated God. And if it was your practitioner that did it for you, your practitioner doesn't know how to demonstrate your health. I know that. I've been a practitioner too many years. I can demonstrate a realization of the presence of God for you, and that's as far as I can go. What that does to you depends on your state of consciousness at that moment. You may think that health is your greatest need of that moment, but as this consciousness unfolds, it fills out in some entirely different direction, and you may carry the sickness for a while other things are getting adjusted. Now, do you see, the whole subject is really God. The whole demonstration that we have to make spiritually is the demonstration of God. Knock out of this infinite way activity all nonsense about demonstrating this, that, or the other thing, and catch this idea that you want to close your eyes, fill yourself full of God, and then be a beholder and see what God does to you. And God does wonderful things to us, but not always in the way that we think and not always in the time that we think. Now, I bring this to your attention for this reason. The infinite way as a whole is a mystical teaching or a mystical way of life. Last week our entire class was on that subject. But a mystical way of life means this. It means living not by law but by grace. That's a mystical way of life. Not because you earn it or deserve it or are worthy of it. Not because you have fulfilled certain conditions of law. No. The woman taken in adultery didn't fulfill any conditions of law. The thief on the cross didn't fulfill any conditions of law. It was an act of grace. Neither do I condemn thee. The past is wiped out. Now, as human beings, we live under the law. And that means we live under the law of drafts, of infection, of contagion. We live under the law of boom or burst. We live under the law of war or peace. And our circumstances vary with all of those things. If there's an epidemic of flu, a certain amount must get that. If there's an epidemic of this, a certain amount must get that. That's living under the law. But spiritual living is living under grace, where you are not touched by conditions of matter or of mind, where neither the individual or collective thoughts of mankind ever touches your mind or your body. You're completely immune to them. As if you were to sit out there and say 2 times 2 is 5, I sitting here knowing they're 4, you can't touch me. I don't care how many numbers there are out here. All of you put together could keep singing 2 times 2 or 5, but you can't move me. Because I'm not under that ignorance. That's a law of ignorance. I'm under the grace of knowledge, of wisdom. So it is. The very moment you make the transition from law to grace, you don't say, I work 6 days a week and earn so much. I am the Son of God and my needs are met. You don't go by what the weather is or climate is for your health. Your health is the gift of God, not a gift given by God. It is God's gift of himself to you, which constitutes your health. And you're not subject any longer to the law of infection, of contagion, of heredity, of age, change. None of these things move me. Why? I have come out from among them and become separate. And now I'm not under the law, I'm under grace. The materialist who's living in matter, he couldn't say this. He has got to have matter for matter, material energy for material energy. The next fellow has got to have a right thought in order to move a wrong thing. But the day comes when you're no longer under the law of either matter or mind, when you are under grace. Now, your income may be chopped in half from this direction, but you'll find that it opens up somewhere in this direction. Your health may fall down here today because of some momentary lapse, but over here it's picked right up again and you start over fresh. Why? You're not under the law, not even under the law of convalescence. You're under grace, isness, being. Now, can anyone do this for you? No. They can only lead you to the water and you have to drink. You have to accept this in your consciousness and then begin to act it out. So that if you leave here and you begin to become aware of inharmonies and discords, whether in yourself or in others, you have to snap yourself back by the realization, yes, but I'm not living under the law, I'm under grace. And hold to that and hold to that until you've broken your past consciousness of law and die daily, Paul calls it, and have been reborn into a life under grace. It's an effort. It's an effort. That's where the mind comes in. The mind comes in as an avenue of awareness. Now that I know it is possible to live by grace, and I've learned it through the mind, I've become aware of it through the mind, now I can remind myself through the mind 1,000 times a day if I want, I live not by matter or mind, but by grace. When I thought I lived by money, I had to think in that way. When I discovered that I lived by the grace of God, I had to learn to recite it 100 times a day. Thy grace is my sufficiency. Until I died, till I broke myself off from that old belief that I was attached to money, or money was attached to me, or we had any relationship to each other. Then it was broken. When it was broken, here was I. Right here. Thy grace is my sufficiency in all things. Do I allow myself ever to be tempted by the belief that money is necessary for something? Never. Never, never. The thought never enters my mind that money plays any part in my life's demonstration. Thy grace is my sufficiency, and I'm living by that. Whatever money is necessary appears, and very often you'd find how often it doesn't have to appear. Now, over here is this world with all of its laws. Over here is my kingdom and life by grace. Choose ye this day whom you will serve, and then stick with it. Now, the man out on the street can't make this choice because he has not yet been led by the Spirit of God to come here and learn these things and be lifted into the place of awareness. Therefore, you can't go out on the street and proselyte. You can't go out on the street and preach to them. You can't even go out and teach them. You have to wait for them to be led into you. Then, because they're led into you, they have been ready for your message. And so it is. People in our phase of work, in this spiritual work, who go out looking for patients or looking for students or looking for lecture engagements or teaching engagements, they're nonsensical. They're just inviting trouble. They're just walking into a lion's cage. But the spiritually illumined sit quietly and let God direct to them those prepared for him from the beginning. So it is with our message. You see how it operates. When something's going to take place, you get notified of it. But no advertisements go out. No new people are solicited. No, if they come, it's by the example of what happened to you. That's all. And that's the way this work is. So it is with everything. You can pray in secret, and the Father that seeth in secret will reward thee openly. Well, at least you see where we're starting.